The month of May is Historic Preservation Month, and I want to discuss a significant anniversary in Addison Historic Preservation history that will be celebrated this year. The Addison Historical Commission will be 45 years old. On July 2, 1973, the Village Board approved an ordinance creating the Historical Commission. As stated in the ordinance, the duties of the commission were to keep a running history of the village, provide for the renovation of historical items, and to solicit and accept memorials. The commission held its first meeting on November 12, 1973. One of the first formal recommendations was the formation of a historical society, which was done in the spring of 1974. They also looked at moving the former Village Hall from Lake Street to the current Village Hall campus for use as a museum. In January 1975, the commission formed a committee which later became the Bicentennial Commission. The two groups jointly planned the bicentennial observances. A history of early Addison booklet was printed, and a historical pageant called the Song of Addison was produced and drew a sellout crowd of over 1,200 patrons. Meanwhile, the search for a museum space continued. In January 1976, the commission was given rooms in Village Hall in space formerly used by the police department. Commission members volunteered to paint the rooms and create displays. On July 4, 1976, the Historical Museum of Addison was opened to the public. In 1978, the commission launched Addison History Week, whose purpose was to highlight village history. A photo and essay contest for children, a library display, and museum open house were held. Addison History Week would go on to be held in some form as an annual commission event through 2004. At this time, the commission also hired the museum's first paid employee. Gloria Phu was hired to work as museum clerk 4 hours each Saturday, giving tours. During the 1980s, the commission continued to look for an alternate space for museum expansion, but none came to fruition. In February 1986, Vivian Krentz was hired to catalog, file, and research, while Gloria continued to serve as weekend tour guide. In May 1986, Gloria Phu resigned after 7 years of service to the museum. In January 1991, the commission first met with village officials to discuss moving the Balzer property to Army Trail Boulevard for use as a museum. But by year's end, the plans were shelved due to the projected costs. In January 1993, the Historical Commission ordinance was updated to reflect the commission's actual duties of providing and maintaining a historical museum for the public and hiring a director to oversee the museum. In 1993, after the village purchased the Century House, the Historical Commission was put in charge of the renovation. In May, they formed a steering committee of 2 commission members and 2 Historical Society members for this purpose. Between 1993 and 1997, a succession of people worked briefly for the museum. In April 1997, Jeanette Paradiso was hired as the part-time curator. By the end of 1997, the village again became interested in acquiring the Balzer House for use as a museum. By the spring of 1998, with the commission's support, the village created the Addison Historical District, which included the Century House, the future site of the Historical Museum, and the 4th Lutheran Teacherage. This time, the project to move the Balzer House and Coach House proceeded thanks to local and state funding. The commission assisted the village with the planning and implementation of the renovation and move in 1999-2000. Jeanette Paradiso retired as part-time curator in 2016 after 19 years of service. I was hired in September 2016 in the new role of full-time historical museum coordinator. Currently, the commission is spearheading the museum's participation in the Standards and Excellence Program for historical organizations sponsored by the American Association for State and Local History. A joint committee with Historical Society members are conducting a self-assessment process which will lead to the formation of goals and action plans to improve museum operations. You can learn more about the history of Addison by visiting the Addison Historical Museum. Admission is free.